The mainstream media, rather than talking about potentially a white guy being radicalized by ISIS, by radical Islam, right? I mean, we've seen that before. That's what's terrifying, I think, about Vegas. That
the potential that could be ISIS involved.
Yeah, that just a disenfranchised older white man can potentially fall into this trap of ISIS propaganda and shoot up a what is it, country music celebration?
Yeah.
That's disgusting. That's what the mainstream media should be focusing on. Instead of focusing on that, they're saying, oh, well, you know, Gateway Pundit for 10 minutes at 4 a.m. Briefly had the wrong name up and then pulled it.
So you guys had the wrong name, identified as the shooter, and it was actually the husband of the girl involved, right?
Yeah.
So you actually identified the person correctly, but obviously he wasn't actually the shooter. He was the husband of this Mary Lou, who was then the girlfriend of the actual shooter. So he is involved, but more tangentially, actually not the shooter. But that was correct reporting. So you guys took it down, this Mary Lou Danley. So you guys took down that post within 10 minutes.
Yeah.
How has the mainstream media responded to you guys taking down your post in 10 minutes?
Listen, I was just screaming at Oliver Darcy over at CNN on the phone in the room back there. It is absurd.
I heard you. I heard the voice. I was like, man, I've never heard Lucian yell at anybody before.
I mean, it's honestly enraging to me, Jack, that again, rather than them focusing on Americans being radicalized by Islamic extremists, that we're focusing on a story that literally nobody saw. Listen, I will say we do InfoWars and Gateway Pundit. We all have incredible news sites. Nobody's really reading us, to the best of my knowledge, at 4 a.m. Nobody's, right. I mean, it's just such a nonsensical thing to me.
So
that
you guys
it's
pulled it down. Meanwhile, the mainstream media will push things out there for days and days. Just yesterday, we had Paul Krugman of the New York Times who tweeted that people are dying in Puerto Rico of a massive cholera outbreak. New York Times, Paul Krugman, 9,000, probably 10,000 at this point, retweets. He didn't take the tweet down, but later in the day he responded, "Oh, I misspoke. It wasn't cholera. It was just a basic infection that was going on." So the New York Times completely spreading all of this fake news about the cholera outbreak, blames it completely on President Trump. But why isn't the mainstream media calling out the New York Times for this? Why are they focused on you?
Do you remember when the Daily Beast misidentified the San Bernardino shooter? They didn't just pull that post. They issued one of these retractions. They didn't pull it after 10 minutes. They took a while misidentifying that guy. What is it? Huffington Post, Slate. Do you remember that when they misidentified, the Newton shooter? I mean, come on. The New York Times, everybody from the New York Times, it's wild. It is wild to me how they ignore their own missteps in the mainstream media. This smarmy club ignores continuous false reporting, and misidentification is just part of it. Half their stories, propaganda for the left. Half their stories are false.
Well, we know this, and we know that it comes down to they don't want.
I'm sorry, I'm getting worked up. By
they
the
don't
way,
want.
No,
it's good. It's good.
It's very agitating.
You're a little triggered. You just need to be a little less triggered. But you should be triggered by these people and what they're doing, because the whole point of this is they are scared to death of people reading Gateway Pundit. They're scared to death of people listening to and watching InfoWars as InfoWars expands to more and more stations, to more and more listeners. They don't want alternate sources of information out there. So they're going to blame you guys of doing stuff that's far less than the mistakes they have made themselves in order to make people stop listening, to tune out, because they know that the minute that you stop listening to them, that's the minute that they've broken their hold on you.